Welcome to the Radiology Vault, an open repository for radiology educational content designed for learners and medical professionals. Presented by the Michigan Medicine Department of Radiology.
Hello, my name is Michael Terjimanian, and I am a cardiothoracic and interventional radiologist at the University of Michigan. In this short presentation, I will review the essentials of CT-guided lung biopsy for radiology residents and fellows. I have no relevant disclosures. We will begin our discussion by reviewing which patients and lung lesions are amenable to percutaneous biopsy, then discuss the basics of the procedure itself, and finally post-procedure management, including potential complications. Requests for lung biopsy are common. The main indication is to characterize a nodule suspicious for malignancy, whether it be primary lung cancer or metastatic disease. Sometimes a diagnosis is already known, but adequate tissue is needed for genetic or molecular analysis. In this case, a core biopsy sample of a lung lesion may provide this information. Tissue can also be obtained as part of an infectious workup, and in some cases to better characterize diffuse lung disease. Perhaps even more important than knowing when to perform a lung biopsy is to know when not to do so. Patients who are unable to remain still in the position required to perform the biopsy are poor candidates for the procedure, as motion will disrupt the millimeter precision required for safe and successful biopsy. Patients with uncontrollable coagulopathy or those not approved to temporarily discontinue their anticoagulation or antiplatelet medications are also not suitable for biopsy. Most guidelines suggest an INR less than 1.7 and platelet count of at least 50,000 to avoid major bleeding complications, though the bleeding risk also depends on nodule location and the type of biopsy needle used. Advancing a needle into lung parenchyma that is severely affected by emphysema or interstitial lung disease significantly elevates the risk of pneumothorax and may preclude biopsy attempt. Likewise, patients requiring positive pressure ventilation have a high risk for pneumothorax and air embolism, and in these patients, a percutaneous biopsy should be avoided. Patients with limited function in their contralateral lung or those who have undergone a contralateral pneumonectomy are also not ideal candidates for percutaneous biopsy given their inability to tolerate a potential pneumothorax to the lung which sustains their pulmonary function. In addition to patient factors, there are also several lesion-specific and anatomic factors which must be considered. The nodule itself must be of sufficient size to obtain an adequate sample. In most cases, nodules measuring 10 millimeters in diameter will suffice, although the location of the nodule can greatly impact the size threshold at which you may want to attempt a biopsy. Nodules located near the diaphragm are greatly affected by respiratory motion and represent a considerable technical challenge for even larger nodules, whereas nodules near the apices are relatively fixed and can sometimes be sampled when less than 10 millimeters. Central lesions are also high risk for complication and best deferred to our colleagues in interventional pulmonology. Approaching nodules with the patient in prone position is preferable to supine, as it reduces respiratory motion and the posterior intercostal spaces offer a wider window for needle advancement compared to the anterior spaces. The posterior approach also helps reduce patient anxiety, as they will not be able to visualize the needle during the procedure. For biopsies requiring an anterior approach, a small towel across the eyes may be helpful to patients. Nodule density is also important, as a ground glass or substyle lesion will be difficult to visualize during the procedure, which utilizes low-dose CT technique, thereby increasing the chance of a non-diagnostic sample. On the other end of the spectrum, lesions with prominent calcification are physically difficult to sample. The nodule should also be closely scrutinized for the possibility of it representing a vascular lesion, such as a pulmonary arteriovenous malformation or a varix. If there is any suspicion, a proper contrast-enhanced diagnostic CT should be performed throughout these lesions, which should obviously not be biopsied. Likewise, cystic lesions in the setting of parasitic infection raise concern for hydatid cysts, which represent a potential source of anaphylaxis and should be avoided. You should also look closely for intralesional macroscopic fat, which can suggest a benign hamartoma, and thereby opt for imaging follow-up instead of biopsy. Finally, the planned trajectory from skin to lesion must be clear of interlobar fissures, large blood vessels and airways, and ribs. Here is an example of a CT chest obtained for a patient with history of cholangiocarcinoma, found to have a new solitary solid, non-calcified 9 by 11 millimeter nodule in the posterior right lower lobe. Given the size, density, and location, this is a suitable nodule for CT-guided biopsy. After you have approved the patient and nodule for biopsy, the next step is to obtain informed consent to explain the procedure, potential complications, and to set expectations. As radiologists, you often do not have the benefit of seeing a patient in clinic in the preceding days or weeks, so the consent process is typically performed immediately prior to the procedure. Therefore, it is imperative not to rush this process and to ensure the patient understands what the procedure entails and accepts the associated risk. Patient cooperation is paramount for successful lung biopsy. After consent is obtained, the patient is placed in the CT table in the desired position, ideally in a manner such that the skin entry is upright, although this is not always possible. Make sure prior to scanning that the patient feels comfortable in the set position, as it may require maintaining for a significant period of time, sometimes 30 minutes or longer. Next, perform a preliminary scan to localize the lesion, trace your planned trajectory ensuring a safe window, select the appropriate length introducer and biopsy needles, and mark the entry slice on the patient's skin with a felt marker. At this point, you can re-image with a radiopaque grid in place to further pinpoint the entry site, or do so later with a needle serving as a marker. The use of a coaxial biopsy needle is preferred as it will reduce the number of pleural punctures, thereby reducing the risk of pneumothorax. After cleansing your hands and donning proper attire, prep and drape the skin entry site in the usual fashion. Anesthetize the skin and subcutaneous tissues with lidocaine buffer with bicarbonate via a 25 gauge needle. This needle can then also be used to confirm appropriate skin entry site and trajectory to the target. Also note at what point in the respiratory cycle you obtain these images, as this needs to be continued until the target is reached. The anesthetic needle can then be swapped for the introducer needle and then advanced under image guidance, providing additional anesthetic to the deeper tissues as needed. Note that the pleural surface is very sensitive just like the skin, and adequate anesthesia is needed at this location to minimize discomfort and motion. Once anesthetized, patients will feel a normal pressure sensation during needle manipulation. Be sure to inform patients of what to expect prior to the procedure so they can anticipate these sensations. Moderate sedation is not necessary but can be considered in patients with severe anxiety. However, as previously mentioned, deeper levels of sedation, including general anesthesia, are best avoided. While advancing the introducer needle, it is crucial to account for the patient's breathing to maintain proper and safe trajectory to the target. Make sure to advance the needle at the same point of the respiratory cycle that you identified earlier when confirming the trajectory. Obtain new imaging after each needle adjustment. Once at the pleural surface, make a final confirmation of a satisfactory trajectory and provide the necessary anesthetic. Advance the needle to the target. You may need to slightly retract the inner stylet to reduce any streak artifact which may be obscuring the lesion or needle tip. After you have confirmed the position, remove the inner stylet and advance the spring-loaded biopsy needle. Obtain samples and replace the inner stylet or blunt tip after removing the biopsy needle. Deliver the sample to the appropriate receptacle, which may contain saline, formalin, or RPMI medium depending on the desired analysis. Make sure to inspect the samples for adequate solid tissue. Scant or friable tissue may be of poor diagnostic yield. If no tissue is obtained, consider repeat imaging as you may have sampled air in setting of a pneumothorax. Once sufficient tissue is obtained, remove the introducer needle, making sure the inner stylet or blunt tip is in place. Perform a limited repeat scan to evaluate for pneumothorax and hemorrhage. If there are no complications, cleanse the skin entry site and place a small bandage. Referring back to the patient with the new lung nodule, the patient presented for biopsy and was placed prone with a slight wedge under the right side for comfort. Initial images localized the nodule and confirmed a safe trajectory. A radiopaque grid was applied to further define the skin entry site. After proper skin cleansing, draping, and administration of local lidocaine, the introducer needle was advanced under CT fluoroscopic guidance. Once the pleural was reached, additional lidocaine was administered and the final trajectory was confirmed. After reaching the target, samples were obtained which yielded solid tissue. The needle was removed and post-biopsy images demonstrated a very small pneumothorax which was later not radiographically evident. Note the small piece of the nodule which is missing along its lateral margin. Pathology confirmed the diagnosis of metastatic cholangiocarcinoma. As mentioned earlier, there are several complications to monitor for closely. Pneumothorax is relatively common, though the majority are small and asymptomatic and do not need further follow-up once determined to be stable or improving. Large pneumothoraces are relatively rare but can be treated via aspiration or small bore chest tube placement. Hemorrhage is also relatively common, and this can manifest anywhere along the needle path. Subcutaneous bleeding is easily managed with manual pressure. Chest wall hematomas are typically self-limiting, though if expanding may indicate an injury to an intercostal artery which may require embolization to control. Hemorrhage within the lung may lead to hemoptysis, which also typically resolves spontaneously and is usually self-limiting or treated with supportive care. Infection is quite rare when proper sterile technique is utilized. Air embolism is an extremely rare but dreaded complication which is a result of the needle traversing a pulmonary vein with subsequent pull of air during inspiration when the needle is not occluded. This can immediately be managed by placing the patient in left lateral decubitus position and delivering supplemental oxygen, with further advanced care based on clinical symptoms following consultation with critical care staff. Of course, the best treatment for any complication is prevention and risk mitigation by selecting nodules and needle trajectories without high-risk features and by incorporating meticulous technique and awareness during the procedure. Here is an example of a small subpleural nodule in the posterior right upper lobe which developed a small pneumothorax following the needle crossing the pleura. In this case, a medial to lateral approach was chosen to cross a normal lung parenchyma prior to reaching the nodule in hopes of minimizing the risk of pneumothorax, as a more direct approach from posterior would have elevated the risk. This pneumothorax prevented adequate tissue sampling but fortunately resolved on post-procedure chest X-ray. In this patient with history of adenoid cystic carcinoma, a right lower lobe mass was biopsied but a small pneumothorax developed after removing the introducer needle. This expanded on the initial post-procedure chest X-ray, which necessitated placement of a pleural pigtail catheter. On the chest X-ray 24 hours later, the pneumothorax had decreased significantly, and the catheter was removed. Pathology confirmed metastatic disease, with adequate tissue obtained for genetic analysis, which subsequently tailored therapy and later resulted in a favorable treatment response. In this example, a subpleural nodule in the anterior left upper lobe was biopsied via a lateral approach as the patient could only tolerate a supine position. During tissue sampling, there was blood returned via the introducer needle and the patient experienced coughing and mild hemoptysis. Post-procedure imaging confirmed the presence of perinodular ground glass consistent with hemorrhage. This patient was asymptomatic following the procedure, and an ill-defined opacity on chest X-ray resolved within 2 hours. Pathology confirmed lymphocytes in this patient with history of B-cell lymphoma. In this patient with history of immunosuppression in the setting of lung transplantation and concern for infection, a right lower lobe nodule was sampled with the patient in left lateral decubitus position. Adequate tissue was obtained, but immediately following the procedure, the patient became hypotensive and mildly altered. Review of the procedural imaging confirmed an accumulation of air within the right inferior pulmonary vein and left atrium as marked by the antidependent lucency in the images. This was not appreciated during the procedure as the images were magnified to the nodule in order to provide a precise trajectory. Fortunately, the patient's symptoms resolved while receiving supportive care in the ICU. Pathology revealed organizing pneumonia but no evidence of organism growth. Following the procedure, patients are monitored for hemodynamics, adequate oxygenation, and pain. Patients are kept in a so-called puncture site down position, which helps reduce pneumothorax rates and can facilitate resorption of an existing small pneumothorax. For anterior puncture sites, consider keeping the patient in recumbent position but with a sandbag or similar weight over the puncture site rather than prone position. Supplemental oxygen via nasal cannula can also assist to prevent or alleviate a small pneumothorax. Patients should be confined to their bed and kept MPO until the first chest X-ray is obtained at 1 hour following the procedure. If there is no pneumothorax or a small pneumothorax is unchanged, patients can move, eat, or drink and use the restroom. A second chest X-ray is then obtained at 3 hours post-procedure, after which the patient can be discharged if there is no pneumothorax or a small pneumothorax is stable, and if there are no other clinical concerns. Patients should be advised to temporarily avoid strenuous activity as this can trigger a delayed pneumothorax. New onset chest pain and shortness of breath should prompt an immediate visit to the ER to evaluate for pneumothorax. In summary, CT-guided lung biopsies represent a core image-guided procedure that should be part of any radiologist's repertoire. Proper patient and lesion selection are paramount for successful and uncomplicated biopsy, and a focus on technical precision during the procedure will help to further mitigate risk. Although by no means an exhaustive review, by incorporating the principles in this video, you will be ready to routinely perform CT-guided lung biopsies with confidence. Thank you.